Passchendaele, The Untold Story by Robin Pryor and Trevor Wilson. Passchendaele, The Untold Story by Robin Pryor and Trevor Wilson is a penetrating look at Sir Douglas Haig's flawed campaign of 1917. More than simply a military narrative of the campaign, however, the authors also explore the political considerations occurring in London at the same time and offer a revealing, bleak portrait of incompetence behind the tragedy. For years, historians have argued about the learning curve that World War I generals had to labor under, in which massive battlefield casualties were simply a byproduct of generals learning how to create new tactics in 20th century industrialized warfare. The authors illustrate that by summer 1917, Haig hadn't learned anything since the previous year's Somme offensive. Rather, Haig went back and forth between army commanders, listening to whoever's ideas coincided with his own, and continuing to back those operations that fit with his preconceived notions. For instance, Haig expected that the breakthrough in 1917 would allow his army to move north and capture the Channel ports along the Belgian coast. This was exceptionally optimistic given the grim realities of the day. The German morale was far from exhausted, as Haig believed, and the tried-and-true tactics of bite and hold held no appeal for him. Further, the authors are very critical of the political leadership in London. For years, Lloyd George's memoirs have colored the general understanding of the British battlefield experiences of the war. Lloyd George essentially laid blame for the failures squarely on Haig's shoulders. The authors here point out, however, that Lloyd George and his cabinet, by their silence, gave Haig a passive approval to continue his operations in Flanders in 1917. Further, they had been obsessed with the other theaters of war, sending guns and troops to Italy or to Palestine, but failed to offer firm direction about the war on the Western Front. This is a very important book for students and scholars of the Western Front in World War I, and one that has added greatly to our understanding of the period. The Killing Ground, The British Army, the Western Front, and the Emergence of Modern War, 1900 to 1918, by Tim Travers. Tim Travers' The Killing Ground, The British Army, the Western Front, and the Emergence of the Modern War, 1900 to 1918, closely examines the development of the British Army prior to World War I and how it was used during the conflict. Travers paints a deservedly unflattering portrait of Sir Douglas Haig, who throughout the war stuck doggedly to the lessons he had learned in the pre-war army. This is one of the reasons why the casualty rates were so high for the British in World War I. Haig was essentially employing Napoleonic-era tactics to modern industrialized warfare. This, coupled with the cult of the offensive that had been drummed into him, along with most other World War I generals of various nationalities, added to the tragedy. Travers details the planning and execution of the deadly Somme campaign, in which thousands of British soldiers were expected to facilitate a breakthrough in the German lines, but instead died en masse. Travers concludes with a wonderful chapter dealing with the British official history and how various pressures and attitudes came to shape the narrative of the war in the history books. All told, this is a fascinating study of a flawed military command and needless human sacrifice on an unimaginable scale. These are issues that cut at the heart of the British wartime experience, and Britain is still trying to understand them 100 years later.